Alright, guys, we are picking right back where we left off. I just read this 2 seconds ago for me, but it's been like a day for y'all. And we are like right in the center of the action. Annabeth and Thalia and Zoe and Percy are all about to fight Luke and the general, and his whole army is marching up the mountain. So we're really getting into this. But they still somehow need to save Artemis, who is holding up the sky. So we'll see how that goes. Alright. Thalia went straight for Luke. The power of her shield was so great that his dragon women bodyguards fled in panic, dropping the golden coffin and leaving him alone. But despite his sickly appearance, Luke was still quick with his sword. He snarled like a wild animal and counterattacked. When his sword Backbiter met Talia's shield, a ball of lightning erupted between them, frying the air with yellow tendrils of power. As for me, I did the stupidest thing in my life, which is saying a lot. I attacked the Titan Lord Atlas. He laughed as I approached. A huge javelin appeared in his hands. His silk suit melted into full Greek battle armor. "Go on, then," he taunted. "Percy," Zoe said, "beware." I knew what she was warning me about. Kyron had told me a long time ago. Immortals are constrained by ancient rules, but a hero can go anywhere, challenge anyone, as long as he has the nerve. Once I attacked, however, Atlas was free to attack back directly, with all his might. I swung my sword, and Atlas knocked me aside with the shaft of his javelin. I flew through the air and slammed into a black wall. It wasn't mist anymore. The palace was rising, brick by brick. It was becoming real. "Fool!" Atlas screamed gleefully, swatting aside one of Zoe's arrows. "Did you think simply because you could challenge that petty war god that you could stand up to me?" At the mention of Ares, sent a jolt through me. I shook off my daze and charged again. If I could get to that pool of water, I could double my strength. The javelin's point slashed toward me like a scythe. I raised Riptide, planning to cut off his weapon at the shaft, but my arm felt like lead. My sword suddenly weighed a ton. And I remembered Ares' warning when spoken on the beach in Los Angeles so long ago. When you need it most, your sword will fail you. "Not now," I pleaded. But it was no good. I tried to dodge, but the javelin caught me in the chest and sent me flying like a rag doll. I slammed into the ground, my head spinning. I looked up and found I was at the feet of Artemis, still straining under the weight of the sky. "Run, boy," she told me. "You must run." Atlas was taking his time coming toward me. My sword was gone. It had skittered away over the edge of the cliff. It might appear in my pocket, maybe in a few seconds, but it didn't matter. I'd be dead by then. Luke and Thalia were fighting like demons, lightning crackling around them. Annabeth was on the ground, desperately struggling to free her hands. "Die, little hero," Atlas said. He raised his javelin to impale me. "No!" Zoe yelled, and a volley of silver arrows sprouted from the armpit chink in Atlas's armor. "Ah!" And he bellowed and turned toward his daughter. I reached down and felt Riptide back in my pocket. I couldn't fight Atlas, even with the sword, and then a chill went down my back. I remembered the words of the prophecy. The Titan's curse must one withstand. I couldn't hope to beat Atlas, but there was someone else who might stand a chance. "The sky," I told the goddess. "Give it to me." "No, boy," Artemis said. Her forehead was beaded with metallic sweat like quicksilver. "You don't know what you're asking. It will crush you." "Annabeth took it." "She barely survived. She had the spirit of a true huntress. You will not last so long." "I'll die anyway," I said. "Give me the weight of the sky." I didn't wait for her answer. I took out Riptide and slashed through her chains. Then I stepped next to her and braced myself on one knee, holding up my hands, and touched the cold, heavy clouds. For a moment, Artemis and I bore the weight together. It was the heaviest thing I'd ever felt, as if I were being crushed under 1,000 trucks. I wanted to black out from the pain, but I breathed deeply. "I can do this." Then Artemis slipped out from under the burden, and I held it alone. Afterward, I tried many times to explain what it felt like, but I couldn't. Every muscle in my body turned to fire. My bones felt like they were melting. I wanted to scream, but I didn't have the strength to open my mouth. I began to sink lower and lower to the ground, the sky's weight crushing me. "Fight back," Grover's voice said inside my head. "Don't give up." I concentrated on breathing, if I could just keep the sky aloft a few more seconds. I thought about Bianca, who had given her life so we could get here. If she could do that, I could hold the sky. My vision turned fuzzy. Everything was tinged with red. I caught glimpses of the battle, but I wasn't sure if I was seeing clearly. There was Atlas in full battle armor, jabbing with his javelin, laughing insanely as he fought, and Artemis, a blur of silver. She had 2 wicked hunting knives, each as long as her arm, and she slashed wildly at the Titan, dodging and leaping with unbelievable grace. She seemed to change form as she maneuvered. She was a tiger, a gazelle, a bear, a falcon. Or perhaps that was just my fevered brain. Zoe shot arrows at her father, aiming for the chinks in his armor. He roared in pain each time one found its mark, but they affected him like bee stings. He just got madder and kept fighting. Thalia and Luke went spear on sword, lightning still flashing around them. Thalia pressed Luke back with the aura of her shield. Even he was not immune to it. He retreated, wincing and growling in frustration. "Yield!" Thalia yelled. "You could never beat me, Luke." He bared his teeth. "We'll see, my old friend." And sweat poured down my face. My hands were slippery. My shoulders would have screamed with agony if they could. I felt like the vertebrae in my spine were being welded together by a blowtorch. And Atlas advanced, pressing Artemis. She was fast, but his strength was unstoppable. His javelin slammed into the earth where Artemis had been a split second before, and a fissure opened in the rocks. He leaped over it and kept pursuing her. She was leading him back toward me. "Get ready," she spoke in my mind. I was losing the ability to think through the pain. My response was something like, "Ow!" "You fight well for a girl," Atlas laughed, "but you're no match for me." He feinted with the tip of his javelin, and Artemis dodged. I saw the trick coming. Atlas's javelin swept around and knocked Artemis' legs off the ground. She fell, and Atlas brought up his javelin tip up for the kill. "No!" Zoe screamed, and she leaped between her father and Artemis and shot an arrow straight into the Titan's forehead, where it lodged like a unicorn's horn. Atlas bellowed in rage. He swept aside his daughter with the back of his hand, sending her flying into the black rocks. I wanted to shout her name, run to her aid, but I couldn't speak or move. I couldn't even see where Zoe had landed. Then Atlas turned on Artemis with a look of triumph in his face. Artemis seemed to be wounded. She didn't get up. "The first blood in a new war," Atlas gloated, and he stabbed downward. As fast as thought, Artemis grabbed his javelin shaft. It hit the earth right next to her, and she pulled backward, using the javelin like a lever, kicking the Titan Lord and sending him flying over her. I saw him coming down on top of me, and I realized what would happen. I loosened my grip on the sky, and as Atlas slammed into me, I didn't try to hold on. I let myself be pushed out of the way and rolled for all I was worth. The weight of the sky dropped onto Atlas's back, almost smashing him flat, until he managed to get to his knees, struggling to get out from under the crushing weight of the sky. But it was too late. "No!" he bellowed so hard it shook the mountain. "Not again!" And Atlas was trapped under his old burden. I tried to stand and fell back again, dazed from pain. My body felt like it was burning up. Thalia backed Luke to the edge of a cliff, but still they fought on, next to the golden coffin. Thalia had tears in her eyes. Luke had a bloody slash across his chest, and his pale face glistened with sweat. He lunged at Thalia, and she slammed him with her shield. Luke's sword spun out of his hand and clattered to the rocks. Thalia put her spear point to his throat. For a moment, there was silence. "Well?" Luke asked. He tried to hide it, but I could hear the fear in his voice. Thalia was trembling with fury. Behind her, Annabeth came scrambling, finally free from her bonds. Her face was bruised and streaked with dirt. "Don't kill him!" "He's a traitor," Thalia said. "A traitor!" In my daze, I realized that Artemis was no longer with me. She had run off toward the black rocks where Zoe had fallen. We'll bring Luke back," Annabeth pleaded. "To Olympus. He'll be useful." "Is that what you want, Thalia?" Luke sneered. "To go back to Olympus in triumph, to please your dad?" Thalia hesitated, and Luke made a desperate grab for her spear. "No!" Annabeth shouted, but it was too late. Without thinking, Thalia kicked Luke away. He lost his balance, terror on his face, and then he fell. "Luke!" Annabeth screamed. We rushed to the cliff's edge, and below us, the army from the Princess Andromeda had stopped in amazement. They were staring at Luke's broken form on the rocks. Despite how much I hated him, I couldn't stand to see it. I wanted to believe he was still alive, but that was impossible. The fall was 50 feet at least, and he wasn't moving. One of the giants looked up and growled, "Kill them!" Thalia was stiff with grief, tears streaming down her cheeks. I pulled her back as a wave of javelins sailed over our heads. We ran for the rocks, ignoring the curses and threats of Atlas as we passed. "Artemis!" I yelled. The goddess looked up, her face almost as grief-stricken as Thalia's. Zoe lay in the goddess's arms. She was breathing. Her eyes were open, but still. "The wound is poisoned," Artemis said. "Atlas poisoned her?" I asked. "No," the goddess said. "Not Atlas." She showed us the wound in Zoe's side. I'd almost forgotten her scrape with Ladon the dragon. The bite was much worse than Zoe had let on. I could barely look at the wound. She had charged into battle against her father with a horrible cut already sapping her strength. "The stars," Zoe murmured. "I cannot see them." "Nectar and ambrosia," I said. "Come on, we have to get her some." No one moved. Grief hung in the air. The army of Kronos was just below the rise. Even Artemis was too shocked to stir. We might have met our doom right there, but then I heard a strange buzzing noise. Just as the army of monsters came over the hill, a Sopwith camel swooped down out of the sky. "Get away from my daughter!" Dr. Chase called down, and his machine guns burst to life, peppering the ground with bullet holes and startling the whole group of monsters into scattering. "Dad?" Annabeth yelled in disbelief. "Run!" he called back, his voice growing fainter as the biplane swooped by. This shook Artemis out of her grief. She stared up at the antique plane, which was now banking around for another strafe. "A brave man," Artemis said with grudging approval. "Come, we must get Zoe away from here." She raised her hunting horn to her lips, and its clear sound echoed down the valleys of Marin. Zoe's eyes were fluttering. "Hang in there," I told her. "It'll be all right." The Sopwith camel swooped down again. A few giants threw javelins, and one flew straight between the wings of the plane, but the machine guns blazed. I realized with amazement that somehow Dr. Chase must have gotten hold of a celestial bronze to fashion the bullets. The first row of snake women wailed as the machine gun's volley blew through them in sulphurous yellow powder. "That's my dad," Annabeth said in amazement. We didn't have time to admire his flying. The giants and snake women were already recovering from their surprise. Dr. Chase would be in trouble soon. Just then, the moonlight brightened, and a silver chariot appeared from the sky, drawn by the most beautiful deer I had ever seen. It landed right next to us. "Get in," Artemis said. Annabeth helped me get Thalia on board. Then I helped Artemis with Zoe. We wrapped Zoe in a blanket as Artemis pulled the reins, and the chariot sped away from the mountain, straight into the air. "Like Santa Claus's sleigh," I murmured, still dazed with pain. Artemis took time to look back at me. "Indeed, young half-blood. And where do you think that legend came from?" Seeing us safely away, Dr. Chase turned his biplane and followed us like an honor guard. It must have been one of the strangest sights ever, even for the Bay Area. A silver flying chariot pulled by deer, escorted by a Sopwith camel biplane. But behind us, the army of Kronos roared in anger as they gathered at the summit of Mount Tamalpais. But the loudest sound was the voice of Atlas, bellowing curses against the gods as he struggled under the weight of the sky once again. Whew. Okay, that's the end of chapter 17. And chapter 18 is called A Friend Says Goodbye, which sounds like it's going to be sad. Whew. That was an emotional fight. Oh my goodness. Luke is dead. And Atlas is holding the sky again, and Zoe's not looking too hot. Percy probably isn't feeling great either. And Annabeth's been kidnapped for like a week, so the only one who seems okay is Thalia, but she is messed up from all the grief. Whew, so sad. Hopefully things will maybe turn around for our little band of heroes. Until then, I'll see y'all on Monday, and have a good weekend.